Ezennel áttérünk a következő jelentésünkre.
Now comes our next item, Council and Commission statements, the possible extradition of Julian Assange. Welcome, Mrs. Seard. The floor is yours.
Honourable members, Commissioner Jourova, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the issue of the possible extradition of Julian Assange. We are all aware that when acting for the purpose of protecting the general public interest, whistleblowers play an essential role for disclosing wrongdoing and dangers to society, and therefore they deserve legal protection. And I know you discussed this yesterday in the debate on the Whistleblowers Directive. We have all been following recent events related to Mr. Assange's case. Julian Assange took refuge in the Ecuador embassy in London in 2012 to avoid being taken to Sweden to be questioned on charges of rape, molestation and unlawful coercion. He argued that his asylum claim aimed to prevent his being ultimately extradited to the United States and put on trial for publishing thousands and thousands of classified US documents. As you all know, last 11th of April, Ecuador withdrew Mr. Assange's asylum, which led to his arrest by the British police. Westminster Magistrates Court subsequently found him guilty on British charges of breaching a bail. In addition to charges in the United Kingdom, Mr. Assange currently faces charges in the United States, and Swedish judicial authorities have indicated that investigations on him may be resumed on charges of rape. Let me clearly point out that the Council, as such, has not discussed the issue of Mr. Assange's possible extradition and does not have a position on it. As a matter of fact, extraditions are a matter of exclusive competence of member states. Therefore, the matter now lies in the hands of the British judiciary and of the UK Home Secretary. But let me take this opportunity to stress once more that the Council attaches a very high importance to the protection of the whistleblowers. As a matter of fact, during the last month, the European Parliament and the Council focused their efforts on ensuring that an agreement on the Whistleblowers Directive was reached before the end of the current legislative term. That objective was achieved, and this plenary voted today on the text agreed by the negotiators of the two co-legislators. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your words. És most átadom a szót.
Thank you. Now the floor is Mrs. Jourova's on behalf of the Commission.
The European Parliament asked the Commission to make a statement on the possible extradition of Julian Assange from the United Kingdom. We can inform you that extradition between the United Kingdom and the United States is governed by a bilateral treaty and a subsequent EU-US extradition agreement. The latter does not allow extradition in case there are reasons to believe it may lead to the application of the death penalty. In addition, the Court of Justice has also decided that a member state must refrain from an extradition if there are serious risks that fundamental rights of the suspect are affected. In case Sweden decides to issue a new European arrest warrant, following the one that it had revoked in 2017, and the UK court would have to consider whether to give precedence to this European arrest warrant over the US extradition request. There are no clear-cut EU rules in this respect, but rather a list of factors to be taken into account by the court. As a general remark, I must note that the European Commission does not have the competence to intervene on judicial proceedings pending in front of the courts of member states. We fully rely on the independence and professionalism of UK courts to take the right decision, having in front of them the appropriate evidence. Thank you.
És nagyon köszönjük. Pospisil úr nyitja a pártok nevében a
Thank you very much. Our first speaker is on behalf of the EPP, Mr. Pospisil.
Paní předsedající, já chci potvrdit slova paní komisařky.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on what the Commissioner mentioned. I don't understand why we're discussing this in Parliament. This is a criminal matter. It's about extradition. There are international agreements on this. The British judiciary will decide, and also the American. These are agreements between two sovereign states. I don't see what this is doing here. There are international agreements respected by states. We can think about the case, Julian Assange, but I don't agree that we discuss this. This person has uncovered things that were important, but there can be risks associated with that. The European Commission has no powers to get involved and weigh on the justice systems of the member states. That should be left to the British judges. They must decide whether they go along with the extradition request, whether they want to respond to the American judiciary if they think it's acceptable. And
thank you very much. On behalf of the SND, Mrs. Gomes, for 2 minutes.
The extradition of Julian Assange to the US must be prevented. That's the only way we can ensure that Europe will protect those who defend transparency and the truth. With the Trump administration, use the media for his own benefit, he would never get a fair trial. They would instrumentalize this to attack the freedom of expression. Human Rights Watch and the American Civil Liberties Union have already made this point, and there's a risk that Assange might face the death penalty. Because Manning has been tortured in prison that he worked with. It's thanks to WikiLeaks we found out what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. The hypocrisy and criminal activities of American administrations and their accomplice governments in Europe. A minister accused me of deceit when I listed the torture flights carried out by the CIA that were authorized by the Portuguese government and started out in Guantanamo. Well, WikiLeaks disproved that. Julian Assange, in the light of the accusations levelled at him in Sweden, must give an account of himself in Swedish courts, where there are proper guarantees for impartiality. I'm sure we trust the independence of the courts in the United Kingdom and Sweden, but at the same time we can't allow them to extradite him to the US. Of course, Julian Assange has created certain people in Ecuador. He broke some of the rules, and Russia has tried to undermine the Democrats in the US. Europe must ensure that Assange obtains justice using the directive we adopted earlier today on whistleblowers. Fundamental rights for the accused in courts must be upheld. That must apply to everyone who risks their lives to speak out against crime and misdeeds of government. So Julian Assange deserves our protection.
Thank you very much. Do you accept a blue card from Mr. Pospisil?
The floor is yours, Mr. Pospisil.
Děkuji pěkně, paní kolegyně. Já jsem se zájmem vyslechl vaše vystoupení.
Thank you. I'm a former Justice Minister. I wonder how the Parliament, a political body, can get involved in a specific case, a request for extradition. We're not responsible for that. An extradition is something important. That's up for down to the judiciary. It's an affair of the justice systems between the two states concerned.
And we know that no European country should extradite to a country that has the death penalty. That's exactly the case of the United States. I'm very sorry. And indeed, Assange, if extradited to the United States, could face an accusation of spying, which would entail the death penalty. That's a very strong reason, political and juridical, why he shouldn't be extradited by a court, be it in the UK, in Sweden, or in your own country.
Thank you very much. Next is Mr. Urban Crespo on behalf of GUE in 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. The detention of Julian Assange represents a dark moment in the history of freedom. His detention affects each and every one of us. The data and information which has been publicized thanks to WikiLeaks and Assange has enabled us to identify many violations of human rights and crimes against humanity around the world. We believe that the detention of Assange is illegal. At the same time, the United Nations rapporteur on extrajudicial detentions has criticized the request for extradition to the United States. Today in this House, we adopted a directive for protection against whistleblowers like Julian Assange. Let's hope we live up to that directive. The extradition of Assange would send out a dangerous message. Those who try to tackle corruption, those who criticize those who abuse power, will pay a heavy price for it. If Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, we will be relinquishing an essential part of our democracy. We will be relinquishing the right to information. This is something which we can't afford to allow to happen.
Thank you.
The
possible extradition of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, to the US isn't just about the fate of a man, it's about the future of our democracies. We should defend the freedom of information and transparency, because this is what it's about. Assange has made public information which disturbs about war crimes perpetrated by the United States. Rather than admitting their crimes, the governments want to silence these voices. We must affirm our attachment to transparent democracy. It's his courage which is judged today. If we accept extraditing Assange, tomorrow we'll be extraditing all those who publish sensible information, journalists, the Guardian, Le Monde, Der Spiegel. France should give asylum to Julian Assange. And
thank you very much. Next, on behalf of EFDD, in 3 minutes, I give the floor to William Dartmouth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now let us start off with one proposition. It is not a good idea for politicians to seek to intervene in the legal process. In fact, it's a very bad idea. The separation of politics and law is central to Western democracy. Now, in the case of Mr. Julian Assange, he was taken into custody, came before a court and sentenced because he was found guilty of jumping bail. There are entirely separate charges of hacking and the like that have been filed against him in the United States. It is these charges that are to be the subject of an extradition hearing. The hearing will take place before an English judge. And what the Council said was factually wrong. The Home Secretary does not decide. Now, many people, including me, have disliked and disagreed with some rulings of judges in the UK, but no serious person doubts the objectivity and professionalism of the English judiciary. Nevertheless, Mrs. Gomez and other colleagues want the legal process to be subject to political interference. Now, this is my last speech in the Parliament, but I have to disagree. To debase the legal process to politics is entirely contrary, not just to Western values, but Mrs. Joly, but to all the institutions of democracy. We as politicians should leave the legal matter of Julian Assange well alone. Now, what were the original legal proceedings that caused Mr. Assange to jump bail? Well, it was the European arrest warrant, and this warrant was brought not by a Swedish judge, but by the Swedish prosecutor. Now, the fact is, despite this, with the European arrest warrant, there is no real defence against extradition, and this is very worrying. Now, we hear a lot in this place about human rights, but it is the SND, the ALDE group, the British Liberal Democrats, all the unthinking supporters of a European superstate, who are also the same people who are big supporters of the European arrest warrant. Their commitment to civil liberties and the European arrest warrant is highly flawed, as it probably was in the case of Mr. Assange. Your commitment to civil liberties and legal due process comes to a grinding halt at Calais, and all in the name of yet more integration. If only these people would think again, and I beg you and urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stelios Kouloglou következik, a GUE.
Next is Stelios Kouloglou on behalf of GUE in 1 minute.
Pilatus today. We are in favor of the whistleblowers, but we have no competence at all. The Council and the Commission. But here we're a political body, you know. We can have our political opinion about facts. Listen what's happening. Let's say a European journalist is writing something or makes a disclosure on Iran. If Assange is extradited, then there is a precedent. Iran will be able to demand extradition of the European journalist, or Turkey, or capture, or kidnap the European journalist. What are you going to say? Because they will say that he violated or she violated the secret of the Iran or Turkey or whatever. So don't play the Pontius Pilatus when the freedom of information and the whistleblowers are crucified.
Thank you very much. There is a blue card from Ana Gomes.
Thank you very much. You have a blue card from Ana Gomes.
I agree with my colleague Kouloglou that indeed this is a political body and we are entitled to make a political judgment, and we are doing that, saying that there should be no extradition to the US. But on the other hand, we are expecting that the courts, namely in the UK, that fortunately is still and will stay in the EU, are bound by the Fundamental Rights Charter and by European Parliament, by European treaties, and therefore it's on the basis of a juridical, legal grounds and not political grounds that a resolution is expected to prevent extradition to a country that still has the capital punishment. Do you agree, Mr. Kouloglou?
I fully agree. We have to make a statement. We have done statements and statements and statements about Venezuela, Turkey, about everything, you know. And you are talking, my colleague, about the legal procedure. Was the legal procedure respected in the case of other countries? We are doing interventions. We are making statements. Why not now? Why? Because the British British government is in a mess because of Brexit, and now the government is trying to escape with Assange exit. This is not fair. This is not right. You are a politician and you have to take a position. You are against the extradition or not?
Thank you very much. You were called. You have the right to answer.
Chair, I very much appreciate you giving me the opportunity to respond. It is a legal matter. That is it. Period. It is a legal matter. Now, if you're an advocate of politicians interfering and intervening in legal due process, that is a perfectly understandable and legitimate point of view, although one that I don't happen to agree with. But that is your privilege. That is your privilege to argue that, but it is completely contrary to the way in which Western democracy and democratic institutions are organised. The separation of the executive and the judiciary is absolutely fundamental.
Szépen képviselőtársaim, Anna Miranda következik, 1 percre a zöld.
Thank you very much. Next is Anna Miranda in 1 minute on behalf of Greens.
To my colleague, if I
Okay, 1 more minute, I give you 2.
Yes.
Is it okay?
I would like to ask you this question, my colleague. What about the processes in Turkey? Is Turkey right when it says that this is a legal action and you have to respect the legal procedure in Turkey and not interfere? And then why we have done so many statements against processes in Turkey? Why?
I keep this as a rhetoric question. Do you want to answer? Not really.
I'll answer in just a few seconds. What colleagues are advocating is that the British government intervenes in the judicial process in England. That is what you're advocating about Turkey is that we intervene or seek to intervene in Turkey. I entirely agree with you with your criticisms of Turkey, and I only wish my government and other governments would make it clear that Turkey will never become a member of the European Union, irrespective of whether the UK is a member or not.
Colleagues, thank you very much. Both sides were heard. You could go into deep talk. So now let's give the floor to our next colleague, Anna Miranda from the Greens. Thank you very much for your interaction.
I had an appointment with Julian Assange, the Ecuadorian embassy, on Tuesday. It didn't happen because he was arrested. But I wanted to denounce the violation of his right to asylum. That means protection from the death penalty and upholding all his rights. It's not just saving him from the electric seat, it's also saving him from going to prison for defending the freedom of the press. He would not get a fair trial in that country. The principle of asylum means that the person in asylum must have all their rights protected. You can't allow someone to end up in an American prison for revealing crimes against humanity. There are no guarantees that the death penalty would not be carried out in the US. So the assurances from the Ecuadorian authorities and the British courts' assurances don't provide any guarantee that Assange will not be extradited to the US. Britain has never ruled it out. It seems that there was collusion between the Ecuadorian, British and US authorities. Assange must not be extradited to the US. If he is, any investigative journalist will be at risk as a use of power.
Thank you very much. Next is the Catch the Eye procedure. Ms. Konečná for 1 minute first.
Děkuji, paní předsedající, vážené kolegyně, vážení kolegové.
Colleagues, today we've voted on a directive which is important in connection with preserving the public interest and thinking of society as a whole. In that connection, I think it's important that all major scandals that have come to light in 2014, for example, LuxLeaks, the Panama Papers, only happened because there were whistleblowers who spoke out in the public interest. Julian Assange, I think, is a hero. The current situation should be taken seriously. It's important that whistleblowers are protected, and that also goes for Assange. We know which president is in power in the US, and that's why we don't.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Commission, Ms. Jourova, Commissioner Jourova is next to close the debate.
Very much for this discussion. I would like to repeat that we fully rely on the independence and professionalism of the courts in the United Kingdom, and I also remain convinced that the fundamental rights and the right for fair trial will be fully respected in the decision of the court. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now the floor goes to the Council.
Members, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to debate this topical issue of high silencing. We will all closely follow the developments of Mr. Assange's case. Thank you very much once again for your attention.
Nagyon köszönjük ezennel a vitát.
Thank you very much. Now I close the debate.